Hi everyone, welcome to my channel. My name is Allie and today we are going to be going over my stats from last year, 2022, my reading stats, and also my reading goals for 2023. So I just wanted to make this kind of like a fun little video. I did this last year where I kind of talked a lot about the book tracker that I made on Google Sheets. So this is just kind of like a book tracker for me. It's not really one that I put out there. It's not really one that I update publicly. It's really just so I can track my reading and see what kind of genres I'm reading, what the diversity is looking like in my reading, and so on and so forth. But I feel like last year I didn't really get to talk about my Storygraph book tracker, which Storygraph has a really great reading stats element to it, and I kind of wanted to go over these stats instead of the stats from my book tracker because I think that they're really interesting and they actually track different things than I would personally track in my own personal book tracker. So I think that it'd be interesting. And I just want to go through the reading stats page on Storygraph. So here we are in the 2022 reading stats, and I had a goal of 100 books read and I ended up reaching 115 books, which is astronomically more than I thought I was even going to read last year. I think I had an actual goal of like 80 or 90 books, but I surpassed that pretty quickly. So I ended up finishing at 115. So the first stats that are on this page are actually the pages read, and I ended up reading 35,399 pages across 115 books, which I think is pretty good. The moods that I focused on in Storygraph were emotional, lighthearted, reflective, and funny. Those were like the biggest sections for mood, and then we go into dark, mysterious, adventurous, tense, challenging, hopeful, sad, inspiring, relaxing, and finally informative. My reading pace for last year was mainly in the medium section. So the books that I read were neither like super fast-paced or super slow-paced. That's kind of interesting. And the majority of the books that I read last year were between 300 and 499 pages. 34% of them were less than 300 pages, and only 1% of them were over 500 pages. I have noticed myself more and more as the years go on, not really putting a lot of attention onto books that are super long, so that totally tracks. That makes a lot of sense. I just haven't really been reading a lot of long, chunky books. So for fiction slash nonfiction, I ended up reading 87% fiction, which duh, and then 13% nonfiction, which I think is really good. I definitely had a goal last year to read more nonfiction, and I feel like I did kind of step my game up just a little bit. I'm hoping that this year, though, I can read a little bit more nonfiction, definitely more memoirs, and also more like informative nonfiction books. So for the genres, it was definitely a pretty long list, but my biggest genre by far was romance, and then right behind it was contemporary, which just makes sense. They go hand in hand. I read a lot of contemporary romance, especially adult contemporary romance, so that's not surprising. The third biggest genre was LGBTQIA+. That's also not super surprising. I feel like I do read quite a bit of queer books, which I love. And then historical is right behind that. And then finally young adult. I don't read as many young adult books anymore, but I do kind of try to keep up with some of them and read the ones that sound interesting. But I feel like if this had been like 3 years ago, that genre might have been a little bit bigger than the other ones. Same for fantasy. Fantasy is pretty small compared to like romance. I feel like if you had tracked my reading about 3 or 4 years ago, fantasy would have been a much bigger genre. And then it goes on to literary fiction, which I love, memoirs, which I love, and then horror, which I've really been trying to get into horror more this year, or I guess the last year technically, but I definitely want to get into more horror books. And then children's and thriller, same with thriller. And then we have magical realism, short stories, mystery, essays, race, middle grade, classics, science fiction, music, graphic novel, biography, dystopian, sociology, psychology, politics, poetry, and history. It looks really funny to see all of the genres laid out like that. I think that's really intriguing. Okay, so for my most read authors, the biggest one there is definitely Julia Quinn, and I blame my obsession with Bridgerton last year. I read so many Bridgerton books, and I also read a few of them twice, so I don't know if they count them twice, but yeah, I read a lot of Bridgerton books and I loved them and I had a really great time, so obviously. And then Connie Rose Porter is the next biggest author on this graph, which also makes sense because I read a lot of the Addie books from American Girl Doll and I really enjoyed those. I think I actually read all of Addie's books, I'm pretty sure. At least the ones that were part of like the collection, like the original collection. So I read all of those and they were fantastic. And then Talia Hibbert, of course, I read like 3 Talia Hibbert books last year. And then same with Lyssa Kay Adams. I also read like 3 books from her last year. And then Joanna Hathaway, I read 2 books. Chris Ripper, 2 books. Sally Rooney, 2 books. Sylvia Moreno Garcia, 2 books. Nora Ephron, 2 books. And Jacqueline Woodson, 2 books as well. So I really do like most of those authors. I think the only one that I didn't really love was Nora Ephron, but she gets a pass because she made one of my most favorite movies of all time, When Harry Met Sally. Okay, and then here's this really interesting chart that I love to look at, and it's basically the books read compared to the pages read, and you can definitely see where I had my best reading month, and that was in March, which is not really surprising because I feel like my best reading months are usually in March, mainly because March is my birthday month and I feel like I just have a lot of energy that month. I have a lot of desire to read, so it definitely makes a lot of sense. And then it dips down pretty far in like April, and then May. June was pretty bad. It picks up around July and August and September. Those were pretty good reading months, but then it dips down pretty low towards the end of the year, which I feel like is every year for me. Like, this is what the chart looks like all the time. And then the very last section is star ratings, and my average rating was 3.81, which I feel like is pretty good. Not too high, not too low, but I wish that it was a little bit higher because I feel like I didn't read as many like amazing books as I wish I would have. And I feel like last year I kind of did prioritize quantity over quality at times. So I feel like this year it's definitely a priority for me to read more books that I absolutely love and that are of quality instead of trying to read as many books as I possibly can. Alright, so those were all of the stats that I really wanted to talk about. So now let's get on into my reading goals for 2023. I don't feel like I have quite as many goals as I did last year, mainly because I feel like a lot of those goals are carried over into this year. So the first goal that I have for myself is allowing myself to DNF books at any point for any reason. I feel like even now I do still kind of DNF books every once in a while, but I don't allow myself to do it quite as often as I wish I would. And I feel like that's kind of important. And it kind of ties back into wanting to read more books that are of quality. And I feel like sometimes I can get distracted by reading a book that I find to be really bad in a way, in like whatever way it is. And I focus on that more than trying to find books that I love. So I really want to allow myself to DNF a book whenever I feel like DNFing a book instead of feeling obligated to finish it. The next goal that I have for 2023 is not being too hard on myself for getting into a reading slump. I feel like sometimes when I get into reading slumps, which happens pretty frequently, I can sometimes prolong the reading slump because I am dwelling on it, I'm being really hard on myself, and I'm not allowing myself the time to like take a break from reading. So I feel like this year I definitely need to not be so hard on myself whenever I get into a slump and not feel so bad about it. The next goal that I have for 2023 is using my Kindle more. I really need to get into reading my Kindle. I have so many books on there, and I also have Kindle Unlimited until like May, I believe. So I have a lot of reasons to use my Kindle, and I do really enjoy getting to read from my Kindle. So it's not like I don't love it. It's just I always forget that I have it, and I don't think of picking it up all the time. So I definitely need to bring it with me places more often and remember that I actually have it. The next goal on this list is obviously to continue to read more diversely in like every sector. So I want to continue to do that. That is definitely going to be a goal for like the rest of my life, is to continue to diversify my reading. So I think that that one's pretty self-explanatory. My next goal, and one of the most important goals on this list, is read more books from my physical TBR, which, as you can see behind me, there are a lot of books, and I really want to read all of them. I don't want to keep putting them off. I don't want to keep... And I feel like sometimes it's because I'm being really precious about these books. I'm like, now's not the right time to read it. I'm not in the right space. Like, this needs to be saved for like the perfect moment. And I don't want to like save my books for the perfect cozy day where I'm just gonna be like completely stress-free. I'm gonna pick up this book, it's gonna be fantastic, I'm gonna love it, because that's so unrealistic. And I just need to pick up the book. Like, I just need to pick a book up and read it and enjoy it for what it is, and I don't need the moment to be perfect. But yeah, I do have a lot of books behind me, and I really need to get to them. I want to read so many of the books that I own. I mean, I want to read all of them, honestly, but I really want to get to a lot of them this year compared to last year. And the next goal on my list is to get a new library card for the library that is in my city, because I do not have a physical library card, and I really need one because I would love to go hop over to the library, pick out a couple of books, and check them out. But right now, I'm not really doing that. And so I definitely want to do that this year. And I also need to go renew my other library card that is in the city I used to live in. So those are two huge things that I need to check off my checklist. And the very last reading goal is actually kind of a multi-parter, because it's reading more of the genres that I kind of started to read in 2022. And among those are horror and short story collections, and also graphic novels. So I really want to get into horror/thriller. I read a couple of those kind of books last year, and I really enjoyed reading them. Even if I didn't like absolutely love the book, I really enjoyed my experience reading the book, or the books plural, and I really want to get into it more and kind of like find my niche within these genres. I feel like with horror and thriller, I really like the more literary versions of those genres. So if you have any recommendations, let me know. I really love books kind of like Baby Teeth. Loved that book last year. Also The Push I really loved, so anything kind of like that. But I really love like a literary-esque kind of horror thriller. And of course, short story collections kind of also fit into that as well, because I found that I really love horror short story collections. So I definitely need to find more of those this year and read them. I have a couple that are on my list, but I'm always looking for more recommendations because I literally have no idea where to start. I have already read The Dangers of Smoking in Bed by Mariana Enriquez, I believe. And I did like enjoy some of it, but I didn't love all of it. And I feel like I enjoyed that collection enough to be really curious about other horror story collections. So if you have any recommendations that are within that sort of genre, then let me know, because I would love to hear them. I definitely want to get into like my horror thriller era. I'm so ready. And then I also really want to read a lot more graphic novels and also a lot more poetry collections. Like, I have been on Hoopla just scrolling to my heart's content, trying to find more graphic novels and poetry collections that look interesting to me, and I have saved so many of them that I might read in the future. So if you have any recommendations for those as well, let me know. Honestly, I'm not really sure yet what my specific niche is within graphic novels or even with poetry. I really liked Heartstopper last year, and then I also read another one last year that I can't remember the name of, but I'll put it on the screen, and those were both really good. And I think also both queer. So if you have any queer graphic novels, let me know. I will read them. And then with poetry, I feel like I tend to gravitate towards more like long form poetry. I mean, I do like shorter poems, like kind of like the Instagram poetry sort of thing, but that's not really my bag, honestly. I really like a bit more long form poetry, stuff that doesn't always rhyme. I don't need it to rhyme. Kind of like a lot of the poetry that I personally write, which is usually longer and does not rhyme. So if you have any like recommendations for poetry collections that you really enjoyed in the past couple of years, let me know. Or even like classic poets as well. I love any kind of poetry. I like Shakespeare. I also love Edna St. Vincent Millay, which I've read a couple of her collections, I don't know, collections of her poetry. And I absolutely love her poetry. It's so good. Kind of reminds me of Taylor Swift. Really fantastic. And then I also recently read Don Lanuza's poetry / prose collection. Fan-flipping-tastic. I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. It was so good, so highly underrated. Like, there are less than 200 reviews for that book. It's so good. Definitely trying to find more poetry / prose collections that I can really relate to and connect with and enjoy. So if you have any recommendations based on some of the poetry that I enjoy, I also like Mary Oliver, if that helps, let me know. I want to hear what you guys enjoy, what you guys might think that I might like. So yeah, I feel like this was just a fun little end of the year, beginning of the year kind of video. I love getting to watch these where people go through their stats and talk about their reading goals, because sometimes it helps me figure out what my reading goals are and what I want to focus on in the coming year. And I'm really hoping that 2023 will be an amazing reading year. I will say that I only set my goal to 50 books, so I'm not trying to pressure myself into reading like 100 books this year or like 200 books or whatever. I think that was a lot of fun last year, but I definitely want to focus more on reading and writing and trying to find that balance between both of those things, because I feel like last year I focused way too much on reading and not enough on writing. So we're definitely going to try to find that balance in 2023 and fall back in love with writing and find the kind of books that I can feel really passionately about. And yeah, so I hope that it's going to be a good reading year for me, and I really hope that it's going to be an amazing reading year for you all. And if you want, in the comments down below, let me know some of your reading goals for 2023. I would love to hear them. And also any of your recommendations for books that I should read in 2023. That would be very much appreciated. Alright, so I hope you all enjoyed this video, and if you did, go ahead and give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. Also go ahead and follow me on Instagram, Twitter, Goodreads, Storygraph, TikTok. All the links for me down below, and I will see you all in my next video. Bye!
Ooh, I thought it'd be me and you. Oh.